Hello everyone and welcome to a brand new episode of Sports Insight with your host Alundar Khan. And yes, as you know, we give you information about sports from all across the globe. You guys can surely reach out to us on our social media handle, which is at the rate of Indus News Sports. That basically works both for Twitter and for Instagram. But anyways, we'll go to the headlines first. And yes, from the world of NBA, Luka Doncic actually outscores Steph Curry for the first time as Dallas Mavericks rout Golden State Warriors. And yes, Real Madrid had to settle in for a 1-1 draw against Thomas Tuchel's Chelsea. And yes, from the world of golf, another sad news as Tyrrell Hatton actually withdraws from the Valspar Championship after being tested positive for coronavirus. And yes, those were the headlines. And not to forget that, yes, we are going to talk about all sorts of sports. To begin with, obviously, we'll talk about NBA. The world is NBA, obviously, there's a lot of effort going on with regards to all the teams, and they're trying their level best and getting ready for the main playoffs. But to discuss this, we have with us Bao Estes with us all the way from the US. Hello, how are you doing, Bao?
I'm excited to be here. Obviously, as you mentioned, we're getting ready for the playoffs in the NBA. So this is a big time of year for us that follow the NBA closely.
Great. So we'll start off with the first match. Of course, we'll talk about the Mavericks winning against the Warriors 133-103. And you know, if we talk about, it's actually Luka versus Steph Curry. So what's your take on this match in particular for now?
Well, a couple of things here. You mentioned Luka and you mentioned Steph Curry. They are sort of outside players in the MVP race that's particularly being led by a guy in Denver named Nikola Jokic. But what I would say here is that Luka outperformed Steph Curry clearly in this one. However, the game was told for me in the first quarter. At the end of the first quarter, the score was 36-12, Dallas ahead of Golden State. Right. That's minus 24 points for Golden State. And for Steph Curry, that's the worst quarter in his entire career. He's never had a worse single quarter. So in a way, it's historic to the negative for Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors. And once they got in that deep hole, they were never able to get out of it and sort of chug back against a Dallas team that was missing one of their stars in Kristaps Porzingis. Right.
But if we look back into the entire week that passed by, so I'm sure you would have seen how Steph Curry was trying to come from Steph Curry 2.0 version 3.0, 4.0, and instantaneously this defeat comes in the way. So what's your take on that?
I think it's tough. I think it really is because, Steph Curry is caught up in the midst of a couple of things right now. One, the Golden State Warriors are trying to get into those playoffs that you mentioned, and the NBA has expanded it this year to include a play-in game. And Steph Curry, man, has been playing out of his mind this month. He has broken the NBA single month record for three-pointers made. Right. So what that means is Steph Curry has been on fire this month from three. He's also very close to the NBA's overall scoring lead, going head-to-head with a guy named Bradley Beal in Washington. So he needed 38 points last night to catch Beal for the NBA scoring lead. He got 27, so he sits number 2 behind Beal. He was hotter just a bit earlier in the month. He's fallen back to earth a bit now.
Right. So it has been an interesting journey for him, as you've mentioned. And yes, 85 three-pointers, if I'm not wrong, because I remember discussing this with obviously my viewers as well, that, it has been an interesting journey for him. And like you said that, he managed to score 27. So he still is at number 2. But, there's more coming in. So let's talk more about, obviously, Mavericks winning against them. But not only that, let's switch to a day before when obviously Sacramento Kings defeated the Mavericks. So how do you see that? Because obviously them losing from Sacramento Kings and then winning against Warriors is also a very big deal.
Well, it's tough because on those back-to-back games, typically you lose the second game in the NBA. You do better in the first game. Clearly, Golden State's a better opponent than the Sacramento Kings. But the one thing that the Sacramento Kings have, this is a team that has young talent. This is a team that brings a lot of energy. So if you don't match their energy, you're in trouble. They have super talented young guards in De'Aaron Fox and Tyrese Halliburton. Tyrese Halliburton is a candidate for Rookie of the Year. So Dallas, again, we mentioned a moment ago, they're a bit injury. They've got some injuries that they're trying to manage.
Right.
And if those injuries, if they don't have all their parts, Dallas isn't one of those super teams like the Brooklyn Nets or somebody like that can afford to have somebody out. They sort of need everything clicking, or they need heroic games from a guy named Luka Doncic right. to win these games. So they don't have those guys. And if Sacramento brings all that energy, Sacramento knocks them off. And that's what we saw happen.
Right. So that's a very good input with regards to mentioning that, Sacramento Kings has those young lot of people. Because if we look at the standings, obviously, when we talk about the Western Conference, so we surely see them around on number 12. But I think, like you said, that, it's if they had someone like Luka or maybe someone out there who with that extra experience, so things would have been probably more positive for them.
Yeah, for sure. Again, the NBA... They always talk about windows in the NBA. When is your championship window? Well, Sacramento is building towards the future right now.
Right.
Their performance this year, while they would rather be higher in the standings, they're looking at 2022, 2023 as when they're a team that's on the rise. They're not quite there yet, right. But I think they're a team to look for in the future. The NBA is dominated by superstars. Superstars win championships in this league. We're talking about people like LeBron James, like right. a Steph Curry, like a Kawhi Leonard. So Sacramento needs that piece. And there are pieces in this upcoming draft that we're going to have that could lift Sacramento over the top. They're just not there yet, but they're gaining experience and they're getting better and they're collecting pieces that can propel them towards that future.
That's interesting. And I think maybe you were right. Sometimes you just need to practice enough and get there. So I think they're slowly and gradually working on their inner side, working on their strengths and talents. And, maybe, who knows, maybe your show right now or your input right now is something that I would maybe retweet and, into 2022, 23. How about that?
Yeah, depending on who they get in this year's draft. I mean, there's a kid named Cade Cunningham out of Oklahoma State right. that everybody views as a superstar. Whoever lands this guy is a team that jumps way up immediately. They're all of a sudden a real contender. I don't know that they view Cade as someone similar to Zion Williamson with that sort of impact, but maybe just a half step down. So if you add a guy like that to Sacramento or a guy like Jalen Green that they can pick up in the draft, all of a sudden this is a team that is into that 6 or 5 seed in the Western Conference in a year or two. And like you mentioned, as they gain experience and as those players mature together and gel together, this is a team that can be on the rise. And what has to happen is not only do you have to get better, some other teams have to fall down a bit. LeBron James is 36 years old. Right. How much longer can he be doing this for the Los Angeles Lakers? Right. I know he would like to play a couple more years at least because his son Bronny James is going to be in the NBA, he hopes, in a few years. But all of those pieces work together towards the future of 2022, 2023, 2024, and stuff like that if you're a Sacramento Kings fan.
We're looking forward for that. Anyways, I'll just talk about the last match. What's your take on Denver Nuggets beating the Grizzlies 120-96?
Well, for the Denver Nuggets, it's an interesting time because they lost a star in Jamal Murray to a knee injury. He tore his ACL. Right. And so this is a team that you would feel like would be reeling. But they recently made a trade. They've acquired Aaron Gordon from the Orlando Magic. They also have a guy named Michael Porter Jr., who is a budding star. Michael Porter Jr. is a 6'10" player who can absolutely light it up from outside. He has tons of athleticism. So what has to happen with Jamal Murray out is these players have to rise up and become that second and third option. Everybody knows that the first thing you deal with the Denver Nuggets is Nikola Jokic, who is the odds-on favorite to win the NBA's MVP this year. So the way they gelled in that game against the Memphis Grizzlies was tremendous because they didn't just beat them, they beat them really good. They absolutely outclassed Memphis in this game. And Memphis is a young team. Again, we talked about the Sacramento Kings. Memphis is sort of in that situation, a little bit ahead of that. They have a young point guard, Ja Morant, who is a budding superstar in this league. He performed well in that game, but they just didn't have much else to match what Denver brought. And for if you're a Denver Nuggets fan, you're a little bit deflated about a week ago when you lose Jamal Murray, but you have to be feeling better about how those other pieces are helping Nikola Jokic as Denver makes that push to the playoffs.
Interesting. So yeah, I believe that losing that one person, but then they surely would want that right person in next draft, I guess, so that it becomes more, it can strengthen the team. But if we look into obviously, if we talk about the conferences, if we talk about big names, big teams, if we look into even Brooklyn Nets to begin with, when they wanted that trio to establish, it had been a very difficult journey for them to get that trio up and running, because sometimes James Harden would be injured, sometimes Kyrie Irving would not be playing, sometimes Kevin Durant would not be playing. So how do you see now the Eastern Conference, if we talk about the Eastern Conference and all heading towards the playoffs, what's your take and how do you see the Eastern Conference heading?
Well, to me, the Brooklyn Nets have more talent than anybody in the NBA.
Right.
What that means to me is that they can get to a level that nobody else can. I don't think the Lakers can play at their top level. I don't think the Phoenix Suns can play at their top level. I don't think the Utah Jazz. Nobody in the Eastern Conference. If Brooklyn is clicking, they can beat anybody in my mind. However, they're going to have to learn to gel together in the playoffs. It looks like James Harden won't be back till either right at the playoffs or just before the playoffs. Right. So this means that Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving will not have much experience playing together. I think the tally right now is 7 games together in total. So that's a real challenge to me, because the one thing that you learn watching the NBA is that the playoffs are an entirely, almost a different sport from the regular season. It's so much more physical. It's so much more defensive. And if you have to learn your roles and how you work together in those playoffs, that raises the challenge level in my mind. I think Brooklyn can do it. And I think, I would look at them as the favorite still in the East, but it's much more difficult. And there's still a team like Philadelphia and there's still a team like Milwaukee that can really, really lay down a challenge for them just to get out of the East. And that's before you even take into account what happens in the West.
Yes, absolutely. And what's your take on the top 3? For instance, we talk about the Western Conference now. They also are like very, very interesting. And when it comes to the Clippers, the Sun, and the Jazz, I'm talking about 3-2-1. So what's your take and how do you see this developing for them?
Well, that's another tough one for me, because the Suns and the Jazz sort of came out of nowhere. Right. Remember, the Los Angeles Lakers are the defending NBA champions, but what they've been dealing with all season is injuries. Their 2 superstars, LeBron James and Anthony Davis, have been out. That means that their regular season record falls down and they're counting on the playoffs. What that's also seen happen is that the Utah Jazz, this is a defensive team that has particular players in offensive positions that can score, have taken advantage in the regular season. They've boosted their record really high. My take on the Utah Jazz is I need to see it happen in the playoffs, honestly. They're the best regular season team. Rudy Gobert is an absolute star on the defensive end. A real solid candidate for the NBA's Defensive Player of the Year. They have a guy named Donovan Mitchell outside who can score in buckets. And then, you have other pieces out there like Mike Conley that works well, Joe Ingles that's a great outside shooter. So there's lots of pieces in Utah, but they need to prove it in the playoffs. Then you look at the Phoenix Suns. They have a legend in point guard Chris Paul, a guy who is, sort of an all-NBA player still at this age, and he's been doing it since the early 2000s. He's mixed in wonderfully with young superstar Devin Booker. So that's a team that's very, very good. They had an impressive win against the New York Knicks recently. Right. So I like them a lot. But then you get down to the LA Clippers, and this is more of a team that I look at, because you've got Kawhi Leonard, who has proven himself in 2 championships with the Toronto Raptors and the San Antonio Spurs, and then Paul George, who has had less success in the playoffs. Paul George is a guy that needs to prove himself in the playoffs. So to me, I honestly, of those 3 teams in the playoffs, I'd almost favor the Clippers over the Jazz and the Suns. Well,
thank you so very much, Bo, for your input with regards to the world of NBA. We'll surely have you again on the show.
It's been so much of a pleasure joining you. Thanks for having me.
Great. So that was Bo, and obviously he talked about the world of NBA, an in-depth analysis on how exactly are the teams struggling to get there to the playoffs. So I think we'll continue with the journey of NBA. But anyways, we'll take a quick break, and once we're back from the break, we'll follow up with the rest of the news. See you guys after the break. And welcome back from the break. And yes, before the break, we were discussing the world of NBA. But as we know that we definitely talk about sports from all across the globe, so we'll surely be talking about football. And with regards to football, we'll be talking about the Championship League and obviously the Champions League to be precise, because it's been a very interesting journey for different teams who have actually reached up to the semi-finals. And one of the semis did take place, Real Madrid and Chelsea, and both ended up having a draw. To discuss all of this, we have with us a football analyst, Dave Tyndall, all the way from UK. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Great. All right, Dave. So we'll start off with discussing obviously how Real Madrid and Chelsea ended up on a draw on Tuesday. So because we still have that situation scenario that was created, because in my opinion, I saw Real Madrid probably more stronger than ever. But yes, Chelsea has been going in the absolute right direction. So how do you see the future of this match to begin with?
Yeah, it was obviously a good night for Chelsea to get the away goal, to get a 1-1 draw away in Madrid. I mean, I'm a Liverpool fan, and Liverpool played Madrid in the quarterfinals and made a real mess of that first leg. They lost 3-1 and couldn't get it back at Anfield. But obviously Chelsea have got not just the away goal, Liverpool got that, but they only conceded one. I mean, if anything, Chelsea might be a little bit disappointed not to have won that game, because they had the chances early on. Real Madrid went with a back three, which is sort of atypical for them, and Chelsea do look a lot more solid under Thomas Tuchel than they did, say, under Frank Lampard. So Chelsea got a good result. If you look now, maybe at the odds, Chelsea are slight favourites to go to the final now. Real Madrid, they're always so difficult to shake off, but I think Chelsea have a slight edge.
Right, and having that slight edge, as you discussed, if you look back into Real Madrid's performance, and obviously I'm more of a Liverpool fan myself, but when we saw the last match against Liverpool, it was, I don't know, we still have not seen the best of Liverpool this time, which obviously has shaken a lot of fans out there. What's your take on that perspective of Liverpool?
Yeah, it's been a tough season. I mean, you can go all the way back to Virgil van Dijk getting injured, and then it was just injury after injury in that same centre-half position. Joe Gomez got injured, and then they've got two guys, Ozan Kabak and Nat Phillips, who were nowhere near the Liverpool team. I mean, who could have imagined that they'd go into a game against Real Madrid with those two at centre-back? They've done the best they can, but it's not like having Van Dijk or Gomez or Matip back there. So it's been a tough season for Liverpool, and yeah, I don't think it'll be a happy ending either. I think they'll get top four. It's just, without the fan, Liverpool, more than anyone perhaps, need that 12th man, need the fans behind them. And it's been so obvious that they struggled at Anfield this season. And Real Madrid went there and got a 0-0 in that second game. And that wasn't a surprise given Liverpool's poor home form. So a tough season for Liverpool fans.
I was still hoping for the victory in Anfield, but yes, I know it still didn't work on Liverpool's way. And if you look into Liverpool's perspective on that specific game, I still remember them getting a lot of chances in terms of Real Madrid, but I think they just could not make the most of those chances. And yes, as you said, that it's from the very start of how Liverpool is not being at their best. But I think maybe for the next upcoming league and the situation changes, maybe they work more on it, because they in my perspective and opinion, I saw a lot of defense issues, not only defense.
Yeah, I mean, the defense has got all the kind of the focus because of all the injuries, but it's up front. I mean, Mo Salah has still been brilliant. You can't deny that. He's still scoring goal after goal after goal.
Right.
But there's been a definite drop-off with Sadio Mane and Roberto Firmino. They've just not scored the goals that they used to do. So Liverpool's attacking, vibrant force up front, people used to call them the best front three in world football, and you couldn't deny that for maybe those couple of seasons when Liverpool got to the Champions League final twice in a row and won the league, and then nearly won the league the year before. But there's been a real drop-off in that front three. Diogo Jota has come in and done quite well, but Liverpool aren't at those same levels up front. And maybe it does go back to the defence. The midfield don't trust the defence, and then they can't support the attackers much more. So it has this knock-on effect. So yeah, Liverpool have a few issues to sort out, but apart from Salah, the other front two have been disappointing.
Right. Anyways, what's your take on, obviously, Madrid will have to face Chelsea, as we were discussing, obviously, the first leg of the match. So how do you see when they travel to Stamford Bridge on the second, and for the second leg on the 5th of May? So how do you see that developing? Do you see a plus for Chelsea right now?
Yeah, I think Chelsea have a slight edge, and they will take encouragement from the fact that, they made Real Madrid look quite ordinary. The problem is, until you've beaten Real Madrid, until you've knocked them out, you just can't shake them off. And they've won this Champions League or European Cup 13 times before.
Right.
And if it was anyone else, you'd think, if it was just a team in white that Chelsea were playing, based on what you saw last night, you'd say, Chelsea, they were the better team. They should go through with home advantage. Just the fact that it's Real Madrid, it just creates a suspicion in your mind that Real Madrid might have something up their sleeve. So I'm cautiously going to tip Chelsea to go through, but it is with those kind of caveats that Real Madrid are such a tough nut to crack.
Right, but we've seen the legendary Tuchel taking Chelsea to the right spot, because initially they were not in the best of forms. But I think one can surely vouch for that. There's a slight bit of possibility that Chelsea may proceed further. But on the contrary, as you said, that Real Madrid is like one of the most, literally in my opinion, I think it's one of the most strongest teams out there. So it would be a very interesting match to see for sure.
Absolutely, yeah. And you're right about Tuchel. I think if this was a Frank Lampard team, you wouldn't have that same level of confidence. But Tuchel, I think the thing he's done first and foremost since arriving at Stamford Bridge at Chelsea, he's tightened up the defence. He's made them hard to score against. They've kept lots of clean sheets in the Premier League. It's still a little bit hit and miss up front for them. Some of their big signings haven't clicked, but there's still goals in that team from different sources. But I think it's the defence and the organisation that's the big strength of Tuchel. And, a 0-0 will send them through. So Real Madrid have to score.
Absolutely. Anyways, that was obviously more of the intake with Real Madrid and Chelsea, and we'll surely be looking forward for that upcoming match on the 5th of May. So what's your take on the next match which is lined up? Obviously PSG and Man City, and talking about both the teams, I think both the teams are literally on fire.
Yeah, it's so tough to call that one. I mean, they're very similar, aren't they? They've had a lot of money pumped into them, both teams, and their goal is to win the Champions League. Both have never won it. So in some ways it would have been a nice final, because someone would then have to win, and the other team, it would have this jeopardy that their search for this win would still go on. The fact that they're meeting in the semis, you could say whoever wins this is probably going to be favourite to win the trophy.
Absolutely. That's how I see it, because when it comes to PSG as well, PSG is all fueled in, and I think a lot of financial influx. And obviously, when it comes to superstars, PSG is absolutely filled with them. But not to forget that when you talk about Man City, their track record really, really shows that where they are and where they stand. And yes, if this were the final, because it sounds more like a final, but obviously it is just going to be the first leg of, the seeing in the perspective of who actually is going to, take that lead for the finals.
It's a very interesting kind of contrast as well, because Manchester City almost don't have a striker. They just have all these midfielders that are changing positions, Foden and Sterling and Bernardo Silva and Kevin De Bruyne. They're all, there's no sort of target, whereas PSG's big strength is obviously going to be Neymar and Mbappe. So it's different ways to attack, different tactical approaches. Manchester City will probably try and have most of the ball, but it's whether they'll have that clinical edge to turn that possession into goals, whereas you feel that PSG, if they create a few chances for Neymar and Mbappe, they will score them. So it's very, very interesting, this game, and I can't wait to watch it.
So looking forward to watch it. Dave, thank you so much for being a part of the show and discussing these matches.
Thank you very much.
Great. So that was Dave Tindo. Obviously, he also talked about how interesting the match is going to be. So don't forget to watch PSG and Man City, which is going to happen tonight. At some parts of the world, it would be tomorrow. But, for us, it's going to be 12 midnight. But anyways, that was from the world of football. The next is interesting take with regards to the world of golf. And as we know that the COVID-19 situation is still out there, the third wave has started. Things are really, really bad and really tricky. I would absolutely want to share this news because Tyrrell Hatton actually withdrew from the Valspar Championship after being tested positive. Not only that, Hatton became the 4th player to withdraw from the PGA Tour. So I think most of the sportsmen are also going through this. And before this, Gordon, Garnett and Stark had actually pulled out because of the COVID-19 situation. So I think we surely need to understand that, the situation of COVID-19 is as serious as it was. I think it's getting more and more serious. So let's hope and pray that these sportsmen and athletes face it, and not only them, I think we all manage to face it and get out of it. Anyways, guys, this was pretty much it from the world of sports. If you guys want to reach out to us, you can reach out on our social media handle, which is at the rate of Indus News Sports. Till then, take good care of yourselves, and bye-bye.